Dad left ranch to golden child. I took 5,000 cattle and bankrupted him in 48 hours. My father ran a cattle ranch in Montana for 40 years. Well, let me rephrase that. He sat on the porch drinking bourbon for 40 years while I fixed fences in blizzards. There's a difference. He had this saying he loved to repeat, usually right around his third glass of wild turkey. Two types of people in this world, Jackie boy, those who own the land and those who break their backs on it. He would look right at me when he said that last part, breaking their backs, like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. My younger brother Ryan was born into the ownership category, apparently. He had this gift for showing up once a year from California, taking a selfie with a horse he could not name, complaining about the smell of manure, and somehow making Dad beam with pride. Ryan worked in tech. Something about apps and disruption, and seed funding. I never really understood it. And honestly, I never cared to. What I did understand was cattle. Vaccines. Hay yields. The exact temperature where diesel fuel gels up in January. The stuff that keeps 10,000 acres and 5,000 head of cattle alive. Dad did not care about any of that. He cared about legacy, about the name on the deed, about sitting in that same wooden chair his grandfather sat in, looking out over land that had belonged to our family since the 1800s. He cared about the idea of ranching. I cared about the actual ranching. I learned to drive a tractor when I was 9, not because it was some cute father-son bonding moment, but because Dad threw out his back and someone needed to bale the south pasture before the rain came. I learned to deliver a breech calf at 13 because the vet was 3 hours away and the heifer was dying. I learned to weld at 15 because we could not afford to replace the broken cattle gate. Everything I know, I learned because it needed to be done, and I was the only one there to do it. Ryan learned to code. He learned to pitch investors. He learned which wines paired with sushi. Different skill sets, I guess. When I was 19, I told Dad I wanted to go to college, maybe study agricultural science, learn the new methods, come back and modernize the operation. He looked at me like I had just suggested we start raising unicorns. College is for people who do not know what they want to do with their life. Jackie, you already know. You are a rancher. This conversation happened on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, I was back to checking irrigation lines. Ryan went to Stanford. I want you to understand something about Montana ranching. It is not like those Yellowstone TV fantasies where everyone looks like a cologne model, and the biggest problem is which wealthy family to form an alliance with. Real ranching is economics and weathering 1,000 small decisions that add up to either survival or bankruptcy. It is knowing that your entire year's profit can vanish because of a late frost or a sick herd or diesel prices jumping 40 cents. For 4 decades, I made those decisions. I negotiated with feed suppliers. I tracked cattle futures. I knew every water source on 10,000 acres. I knew which sections flooded in spring, which ridges caught the worst wind, which pastures recovered fastest from grazing. Dad knew which bourbon he preferred. But here is what Dad understood that I did not, at least not until it was too late. Ownership beats knowledge. Every single time. You can be the best rancher in Montana, but if your name is not on the deed, you are just expensive labor. Dad died on a Tuesday in March. Heart attack. Quick and clean, the way he would have wanted it. He was 73. I found him in his chair on the porch, glass of bourbon still in his hand, looking out over the valley like he was waiting for something that never came. I did not cry. I am not sure why. Maybe because some part of me had been preparing for this since I was 9 years old. Since the first time he made it clear that I was a help and Ryan was the heir. Maybe because grief is a luxury when you have 5,000 head of cattle, depending on you. The cattle did not care that the old man was gone. They still needed feeding. The funeral was small. Dad was not a social man. A few neighbors showed up. People who remembered him from better days before the bourbon became a full-time job. Ryan flew in from San Francisco, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my truck. He hugged me at the service, and I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and Italian. It smelled like money. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday. Dad's lawyer, Frank Morrison, had an office in town above the hardware store. The kind of place that smelled like old books and broken promises. Frank had been Dad's lawyer for 30 years, handled everything from property disputes to the time Dad got sued by a hunting guide who claimed our fence was on public land. I showed up in my work clothes. Clean jeans, a button-up shirt I kept for occasions that required looking somewhat civilized. Ryan showed up looking like he was closing a business deal. Suit, tie, leather portfolio. He smiled at me when I walked in, that same smile he had been giving me since we were kids. The smile that said he knew something I did not. Frank cleared his throat, shuffled papers. Did that thing lawyers do when they're about to deliver bad news, but are contractually obligated to maintain professional composure. Gentlemen, your father's estate is straightforward in structure, but specific in distribution. Here is what straightforward meant. Ryan got 100% of Montana Sky Ranch, LLC. That is the company that owned everything that mattered. 10,000 acres of prime Montana rangeland. The main house, built in 1892, renovated over generations. The brand registered and recognized across 3 states. The water rights, which in Montana are sometimes worth more than the land itself. The legacy, the ownership. I got all movable personal property, including livestock, equipment, and tools. Let me translate that for you. I got the stuff Dad considered expenses. The cattle, the tractors, the trucks, the welding equipment in the barn, the tools, the things that actually made the ranch function, the things I had spent 40 years maintaining, improving, and depending on. But I did not get an acre of land to put any of it on. Frank looked uncomfortable. He had known our family for 3 decades. He had watched me grow up on that ranch. He knew exactly what this meant. Ryan did not seem to notice Frank's discomfort. He was too busy processing his own victory. I could see it in his face. That moment of realization. The land is mine. The ranch is mine. The legacy is mine. He put his hand on my shoulder. I remember thinking his hand felt soft, moisturized, like he had never gripped a fence post in his life. His smile was wide, and when he spoke, I could see the veneers. Perfect white teeth, that probably cost 10 grand. Listen, bro, no hard feelings, okay? Dad just, well, he wanted someone who could take this place to the next level. I have been thinking about it. Ecotourism, glamping, maybe a farm-to-table restaurant experience. Really tap into that authenticity market. I did not say anything. I just looked at him. So here's what I am thinking. You've got 30 days to move your cows and your stuff off my property. That should be plenty of time, right? You are organized. You are good at logistics. That is your thing. 30 days. To remove 5,000 head of cattle. To find new pasture. To relocate equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. To dismantle a life built over 4 decades. 30 days. He was still smiling. Oh! And hey, you can keep that old blue pickup. The 96 Ford. Think of it as severance. I am going to need the newer trucks for the business. But that one is all yours, man. The 96 Ford. The truck with 200,000 miles on it. A transmission that slipped in 3rd gear, and a passenger door held shut with baling wire. My severance package. I looked at Ryan's manicured fingernails, at his perfect teeth, at the suit that cost more than a month to feed. And I understood something in that moment. 30 days. He had just pulled the pin on a grenade, handed it to me, and did not even realize the grenade was his. I nodded slowly. Got it, boss. Frank Morrison watched this exchange with the expression of a man witnessing a car accident in slow motion. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again. Whatever he was thinking, he decided it was not his place to say it. Lawyers are good at that, staying in their lane. He handed me a folder with copies of the will, the property documents, the inventory lists. Ryan was already on his phone, probably texting his investor friends about his new Montana property. Already planning, already spending money. He did not have on dreams he did not understand. I took the folder and walked out of that office, down the narrow stairs, past the hardware store, into the parking lot where my severance package was waiting for me. The 96 Ford started on the 3rd try. It always did. I want to tell you about that drive back to the ranch. It is 40 minutes from town, mostly two-lane highway cutting through valley and foothill. In March, Montana is caught between seasons. The snow is mostly gone from the low country, but the peaks are still white. The grass has not started yet. Everything is brown and gray and waiting. I did not turn on the radio. I just drove and thought about the last 40 years. Every fence I had mended, every calf I had pulled, every midnight emergency when a water line froze or a gate came loose in a windstorm, every decision I had made to keep that ranch alive. And I thought about Dad, sitting in his chair, deciding that all of that was worth less than a name on a deed. Here is something Marcus Aurelius wrote that I read once in a book someone left in a diner. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I read that and thought it was philosophical nonsense. Ranching is all about outside events. Weather, markets, cattle prices, disease. You do not control any of it. You just react and hope you react fast enough. But driving back that day, I started to understand what the old Roman meant. I could not control Dad's decision. I could not control Ryan's arrogance. But I could control what I did next. I got back to the ranch around sunset. Ryan's rental car was already there, parked in front of the main house like he owned the place, which, legally speaking, he did. I could see lights on inside. Movement. He had brought people with him. I could hear laughter floating across the yard. I did not go to the main house. I went to my office. It is not much. A small room attached to the equipment barn, insulated enough to keep the coffee hot and the files dry. It smells like diesel and paper, and the kind of coffee you make at 4 in the morning, because you've got a long day ahead, and sleep is a luxury you cannot afford. I sat down at my desk, turned on the lamp, and I opened the old fireproof safe I keep in the corner. People think ranching is romantic. They think it is about the land and the sky and being one with nature or whatever fantasy they saw in a movie. Ranching is accounting. It is contracts and debts and margins so thin you can see through them. It is knowing that your entire operation can collapse because of one bad decision or one piece of bad luck. Let me explain something about Montana ranching economics. Land is expensive, really expensive. Prime ranch land can run $5,000 an acre or more. Dad's 10,000 acres? In today's market, that is worth somewhere north of $50 million. That is the asset Ryan just inherited. That is what Dad wanted to keep in the family. But here's what they teach you in agricultural economics. If you bother to study it instead of just inheriting it, land does not make money. Land just sits there being land. What makes money is what you do with the land. The cattle, the hay, the operation. And in Montana, where winter lasts 6 months and feed costs go through the roof and beef prices swing wildly, the operation loses money 9 months out of the year. To keep a ranch that size alive, you need capital. Working capital. Every spring, I took out an operating loan from First Agricultural Bank. $2 million. That money paid for feed, fuel, veterinary care, seasonal labor, equipment maintenance, and everything else required to run 5,000 head of cattle through a Montana year. Every fall, we sold the cattle, paid back the loan, started over the next spring. This cycle had been running for 10 years. It worked because the bank trusted me. They trusted that I knew what I was doing. They trusted that the cattle would be there as collateral. Dad had already maxed out the land as collateral years ago. Second mortgages, lines of credit. He had borrowed against every acre trying to keep up appearances, trying to maintain the legacy, trying to avoid admitting that the glory days were over and the bourbon was not helping. The bank knew all of this. They were not stupid. The only reason they kept lending me that $2 million every spring was because of the collateral that actually mattered, the stuff that worked, the cattle, the equipment, the movable assets, the stuff Dad called expenses in the will, the stuff he left to me. I pulled out the loan agreement. It was thick, full of legal language and terms and conditions that most people never read because they assume it is all standard. But I had read it, every word, multiple times. Because when you are borrowing $2 million, you make damn sure you understand what you are agreeing to. Page 47, Section 14, Subsection B. written in that small font lawyers love because it makes people skip over it. I had a highlighter mark on it from years ago when I first noticed it. The language was specific and clear. Immediate and complete repayment of outstanding debt shall be required in the event of removal or alienation of collateral, livestock, and equipment from LLC property. Let me translate that into English. If the collateral leaves a property, the entire loan becomes due immediately, not next spring, not in 30 days. Immediately, $2 million, due in full, to the new owner of Montana Sky Ranch, LLC. Ryan had just ordered me to remove all my cattle and equipment from his property within 30 days. He had put it in writing in front of a lawyer. He had given me a direct order to trigger the one clause that would destroy him, and he had absolutely no idea what he had just done. I sat there in my office, looking at that contract, and I started to laugh. Not a happy laugh, not a cruel laugh, just the kind of laugh that happens when you realize the universe has a sense of humor after all. Here is what Ryan and Dad never understood. They looked at the ranch and saw land, assets, legacy, history. They saw something worth owning, something worth fighting over, something worth leaving to the golden child while the other one got the scraps. What they did not see was that a Montana ranch is not an asset. It is a hungry machine. It eats money every single day. Feed costs, fuel costs, maintenance, labor, taxes, insurance, veterinary bills. It eats and eats and eats, and if you stop feeding it, it dies. The only thing that keeps it alive is the stuff Dad considered beneath him. The cattle, the work, the daily grind of making sure the machine does not stop. Ryan just inherited a machine that was about to run out of fuel, and he had 30 days before he figured it out. Actually, he had less than that. He had however long it took me to make a few phone calls. That night, while Ryan and his California friends laughed on the porch, probably discussing where to put the Wi-Fi-enabled yurts and the farm-to-table restaurant, I sat in my office and made a list. I am good at lists. Lists are how you survive Montana winters. Lists are how you make sure nothing gets forgotten when forgetting something means dead cattle or broken equipment. I needed trucks. A lot of trucks. Cattle haulers. I needed new pasture. I needed a place to put 5,000 head of cattle where they could graze and recover until I figure out the next step. I needed equipment haulers. I needed people I could trust who would not ask too many questions and who would move fast when I said move. I had all of that. I had spent 40 years building relationships with every rancher, every trucker, every livestock hauler in 3 counties. I had helped people, lent equipment, shared knowledge, worked deals that were fair even when I could have pressed my advantage. I had built something Dad never understood, a network, a reputation, credit that was not financial but was worth more than money. I started making calls. The first call was to Tom Hendricks. He ran the biggest cattle hauling operation in the state. 20 trucks, good drivers, fair prices. I had used him for years. His son had worked summers on our ranch learning the business. Tom owed me nothing, but we had history. Tom answered on the second ring. His voice had that gravel quality that comes from decades of cigarettes and diesel fumes. Jack, what is going on? I need trucks, Tom. A lot of them. How many can you get me by 5 a.m. tomorrow? There was a pause. A long one. That is, Jesus, Jack. That is 8 hours from now. You are talking about your whole herd, right? 5,000 head, I said. I know it is fast. Can you do it? Another pause. I could hear him breathing, thinking, calculating. I can get you maybe 15 trucks if I wake up every driver I know and call in every favor I've got. The rest will take longer. We are talking about bringing in trucks from 3 counties. Start with 15 at 5 a.m., I said. I will take the rest as they come throughout the day. Bill me standard rates. Tom did not ask why. That is the thing about people who actually work for a living. They understand that sometimes you need to move fast, and explanations can wait. He just said he would make it happen and hung up. The next call was to Sarah Chun. She owned the Triple Creek Ranch, about 60 miles northeast. Smaller operation than ours, maybe 2,000 acres, but well managed. Her husband had died 5 years back, and I had helped her through that first year, lent her equipment, gave her advice. Never asked for anything in return, because that is what neighbors do. "Sarah," I said when she picked up, "I need a favor. A big one." She did not hesitate. "What do you need, Jack?" "Pasture. Enough for 5,000 head. Temporary. Maybe a few months while I figure things out. I will pay fair rates. I will cover all feed costs. I just need the space." I heard her breath catch. "Jack, that is your entire herd. What happened?" "I will explain later," I said. "Right now I just need to know if you have the space." She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her thinking, running numbers in her head, calculating capacity and risk, and what would mean to suddenly double the number of cattle on her property. "I have got maybe enough space for 3,000 head," she said finally, "if we use the north section and rotate carefully. But Jack, 5,000 head is a lot of cattle. That is a lot of feed, a lot of water, a lot of management." "I will handle it," I said. "I will bring my own crew. You just provide the land. I will do the rest." "Okay," she said. "Okay, Jack. If you need it, it is yours." I thanked her, made a note, 3,000 head to Triple Creek. I needed to find space for the other 2,000. I kept calling. By midnight, I had all the calls made. The plan was set. 15 trucks coming at 5 a.m., more throughout the day and the next. Pasture lined up across 3 different ranches, equipment haulers scheduled. A crew of guys who had worked for me over the years, all agreeing to show up before dawn to help with the move. Nobody asked questions. Everyone just said yes. That is what 40 years of doing right by people gets you. When you need help, people show up. I did not sleep that night. I could not. The adrenaline was too strong. The mathematics too perfect. I sat in my office, drinking coffee, going over logistics, making sure I had not forgotten anything, making sure the plan was airtight. Around 3 in the morning, I pulled out the loan documents one more time, read Section 14, subsection B again, made sure I understood exactly what it said and what it meant. The language was clear. Removal of collateral triggers immediate repayment. Ryan had ordered me to remove the collateral. He had done it in front of a lawyer. It was documented, legal, binding. At 5 o'clock in the morning, when those first trucks rolled through the gate, the collateral would start moving. And the moment the collateral crossed the property line, the clock would start ticking on Ryan's $2 million debt. I looked at my watch. It was 3:02 a.m. 2 hours. 2 hours until those first trucks rolled in. 2 hours until Ryan's world ended. He just did not know it yet. Outside my window, I could still see lights on in the main house. Could still hear faint laughter. Ryan and his friends, celebrating, planning their glamping empire, probably looking at architectural drawings, probably thinking about how much money they were going to make turning authentic Montana ranching into an Instagram experience. I thought about my father, about 40 years of being told I was the one who broke his back on the land, about being the help while Ryan was the heir, about every time Dad looked at me and saw a tool instead of a son. There is another Marcus Aurelius quote I remember. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. I had always tried to live by that. Tried to be better than the resentment. Tried to focus on the work instead of the unfairness. But sitting there in my office at 3 in the morning, looking at loan documents and logistics lists, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge is not about being unlike them. Sometimes the best revenge is just about being smarter, about seeing what they are too arrogant to notice, about letting them destroy themselves while you just follow their orders. Ryan had given me 30 days to remove my cattle and equipment from his property. I was just going to do it a little faster than he expected. I was just going to be efficient. That is what I do. That is what I've always done. I finished my coffee, turned off the lamp, walked out of my office into the cold Montana night. The stars were out, bright, and clear the way they only get in places far from cities. I could see the outline of the mountains against the sky, could hear cattle settling in the distance, could smell sage and cold air and diesel fuel. 2 hours. I wanted to get some sleep. It was going to be a busy day. I got maybe 90 minutes of sleep, not because I set an alarm, but because my body has been waking up before dawn for 40 years. Some habits you cannot break even when you want to. At 4:30 a.m., I was already showered, dressed, and drinking coffee in my office. The kind of coffee that tastes like motor oil but keeps you sharp when you need it most. Through the window, I could see headlights coming up the access road. Tom Hendricks was early. Of course he was. Good people are always early. By 4:45, there were 15 cattle haulers lined up along the main road, like a convoy preparing for invasion, diesel engines rumbling in the pre-dawn darkness. My crew was already there. 8 guys I had worked with for years. Carlos, who could read a sick cow better than most vets. Mike, who had been with me since he was 17 and was now pushing 40. Jimmy, who could fix anything with a welder and some scrap metal. These were not hired hands. These were professionals who understood that sometimes you move fast and ask questions later. They were drinking coffee from thermoses, not talking much, just nodding to each other. Ready? At 4:55, I walked out of my office and across the yard to where the trucks were waiting. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, that pale gray that comes before sunrise in Montana. Cold enough that I could see my breath. Cold enough that the diesel exhaust hung in the air like fog. Tom Hendricks was leaning against the lead truck, smoking a cigarette. He looked at me and nodded. Ready when you are, Jack. I looked at my watch. 4:58. 2 minutes until 5 a.m. 2 minutes until the collateral started moving. 2 minutes until Ryan's world ended, and he did not even know it yet. Let us roll, I said. Here is what 5,000 head of cattle sounds like when you move them at dawn. It sounds like the end of something. Low bellowing, hooves on frozen ground, gates clanging, men shouting directions, diesel engines revving. It is loud, really loud, the kind of loud that carries across open land and wakes up anyone within a mile radius. Ryan and his California friends were definitely awake now. We started with the north pasture. That is where the main herd was grouped. 1,500 head of prime Montana beef cattle. Black Angus mostly, some Herefords, each one representing months of feed, care, and management, each one worth about $1,500 on the current market. Do the math. That is over $2 million in livestock moving through those gates. The operation was methodical. Carlos and Mike worked the lead, guiding the first groups toward the loading chutes. The cattle haulers had portable ramps set up, professional work, clean and efficient. Each truck could hold about 35 head if you packed them right. Not comfortable for the cattle, but legal and safe for a few hours of transport. By 5:30, the first 3 trucks were loaded and rolling out. I watched them go, their taillights disappearing down the access road. Each truck that left was another nail in Ryan's coffin. Each truck was another few $100,000 of collateral crossing the property line, triggering Section 14, Subsection B, making that $2 million loan immediately due and payable. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, just a cold mathematical certainty that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. At 5:45, Ryan appeared. He came stumbling out of the main house wearing a silk bathrobe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. His hair was sticking up. He looked confused. Then he looked furious. He started walking toward me, fast, his expensive slippers getting muddy in the yard. I could see his face getting red even in the pre-dawn light. One of his California friends was following him, holding a phone, probably recording everything for Instagram or whatever these people do. Ryan started yelling before he even got close. What the hell do you think you are doing? This is illegal. This is trespassing. I am calling the sheriff. I did not stop working. I just kept watching Carlos guide another group of cattle toward the loading chute. Waited until Ryan was close enough that I did not have to yell. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 2 pieces of paper, handed them to him. The first paper was a copy of the will, the section that said I inherited all movable personal property, including livestock, equipment, and tools. The second paper was a copy of the eviction notice he had given me yesterday. His own words, written down, signed in front of Frank Morrison. 30 days to remove my cattle and equipment from his property. I am just following your orders, boss, I said. You told me to get my stuff off your land. I am being efficient about it, trying not to interfere with your glamping plans. Ryan looked at the papers, looked at the trucks, looked at the cattle being loaded. His face went through about 5 different expressions in 10 seconds. Confusion, realization, panic, back to anger. He was trying to process what was happening, but his brain was not moving fast enough. You cannot do this, he said. His voice was shaking now. You cannot just... there are procedures. You need permits. I have got everything I need, I said. I have got ownership papers for every head of cattle. I have got permits for livestock transport. I have got certified haulers with valid commercial licenses. And I have got your written order to remove my property from your land within 30 days. I am just doing it faster than you expected, being considerate, getting out of your way so you can start your renovations. One of Ryan's friends was standing behind him, filming on his phone. I looked directly at the camera, made sure my face was visible, made sure my voice was clear. Just want on record that I am complying with the lawful order of the property owner. Everything here is legal and documented. Now, if you will excuse me, I've got work to do. I turned my back on Ryan and walked toward the next loading chute. Behind me, I could hear him sputtering, trying to find words, trying to find some angle that would make this stop. There was no angle. He had pulled the trigger himself. He just had not realized the gun was pointed at his own head. By 6 a.m., we had moved 1,000 head. The sun was coming up now. Beautiful Montana sunrise, orange and pink spreading across the valley. The kind of morning that makes you remember why people fight for this land. Ryan was back in the main house, probably on the phone with lawyers. Good luck with that. Here is something they do not teach you in business school. Logistics is everything. You can have the best plan in the world, but if you cannot execute it, the plan is worthless. I had spent 40 years learning how to move cattle, manage equipment, coordinate crews. Ryan had spent 40 years learning how to pitch investors and order expensive wine. Guess which skill set was more useful right now? By 7 a.m., we had cleared the north pasture, moved on to the east section. More trucks were arriving. Tom had called in every hauler he knew. By 8 a.m., we had 23 trucks rotating through. Load, drive, unload at the new pastures, come back. Assembly line efficiency. Carlos walked up to me around 8:15. He was grinning, that quiet grin of a man who is enjoying watching karma work. Boss, he said, that Ryan guy? He came out about 20 minutes ago. Started yelling at Jimmy. Called him to help. Told him to be careful with the gate because it was valuable property. What did Jimmy say? I asked. Nothing, Carlos said. He just smiled and kept working. But he is working real careful now. Real slow, taking his time with everything. I think we all are. I looked around the operation. My crew was working with a kind of deliberate slowness that looks busy, but is actually malicious compliance. Following every safety protocol. Double-checking every load. Making absolutely sure that nothing could be called negligent or rushed. It was beautiful. Keep it legal, I told Carlos. But take your time. We've got all day. By 9 a.m., we had moved 3,000 head. The ranch was starting to look empty. Pastures that had been full of cattle now just had fence posts and grass. The difference was stark. Shocking, even. This is what a working ranch looks like when you remove the work. At exactly 9:01 a.m., I walked to my old blue pickup, the 96 Ford, my severance package. I sat in the cab and pulled out my phone, dialed a number I had memorized years ago. Mr. Henderson answered on the second ring. First Agricultural Bank, Henderson speaking. Good morning, Mr. Henderson, I said. This is Jack. I am calling my capacity as the owner of collateral for loan number 774 under Montana Sky Ranch, LLC. I am notifying you that I am fulfilling my fiduciary obligations as a collateral owner. There was a pause. Jack, what is going on? The new owner of Montana Sky Ranch, LLC, Mr. Ryan, issued me a direct written order yesterday evening to immediately remove all my assets from his property. That includes all livestock and equipment that currently serves as collateral for the outstanding operating loan. I am executing his order as we speak. The cattle are currently being transported to new pasture locations in neighboring counties. I estimate the last of collateral will be off the LLC property by approximately 1400 hours today. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear Mr. Henderson breathing, could almost hear his brain processing the implications. Jack, are you telling me that the collateral for a $2 million loan is being removed from the property? Yes, sir, I said. I am required to comply with the property owner's lawful orders. He instructed me to remove my movable property within 30 days. I am simply being efficient about it. Jack, you know what this means. Section 14, subsection B. Yes, sir, I do. The outstanding debt becomes immediately due and payable upon removal of the collateral from the LLC property. I understand that. I am just informing you as a courtesy that the new owner ordered this action. I assume you'll want to contact him directly about arrangements for repayment. I believe he is currently at the main house. He has had a busy morning. I could hear papers rustling. Could hear Mr. Henderson talking to someone else in the office. Probably pulling up the loan file. Probably looking at the balance. $2 million. Due immediately. To a man who had owned the property for less than 24 hours and had zero operational cash flow. Thank you for the notification, Jack, Mr. Henderson said finally. His voice had changed. Gone professional. Cold. We will be contacting Mr. Ryan immediately to discuss repayment arrangements. I figured you would, I said. Have a good day, sir. I hung up, sat there in the truck for a moment. The sun was warm through the windshield now. I could see the loading operation continuing. Smooth, professional, unstoppable. I started the truck and drove to the south pasture to check on the next phase. By 10 a.m., Ryan knew. I did not see the phone call happen, but I saw the aftermath. He came running out of the house. Actually running. Still in that ridiculous silk bathrobe. He was holding his phone. Screaming. The kind of screaming that has no words, just rage and panic compressed into sound. He ran toward me. I was standing by the main barn, watching Jimmy and two other guys load a John Deere tractor onto a flatbed. Ryan got about 10 feet away and stopped. His face was purple. Actually purple. I had never seen a human being that color before. What did you do? He said. His voice was shaking. What did you do? I looked at him. Did not say anything for a moment. Let him stand there. Let him feel it. Then I spoke quietly, calmly, the way you talk to a spooked horse. I did exactly what you told me to do. I removed my property from your land. You ordered it, in writing, in front of a lawyer. I am just following orders. The bank, he said. The bank called me. They want $2 million. Today. By end of business today. They said if I do not pay, they're going to foreclose. Jack, you have to fix this. You have to put the cattle back. I cannot do that, I said. You evicted me. You told me to get my stuff off your property. The cattle are my stuff. They are on different property now. Property that you do not own. I cannot bring them back without your written permission. And even if you gave me permission, the bank has already been notified. Section 14, subsection B has been triggered. The debt is due. That is not something I can untrigger. Ryan was shaking now, actually physically shaking. But this is your fault. You did this on purpose. You sabotaged me. I did exactly what you told me to do. I said again, you inherited a company with debts. That is how inheritance works. You get the assets and the liabilities. The cattle were the collateral for those debts. You ordered me to remove the collateral. I complied. What happens next is between you and the bank. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a fish drowning in air. Behind him, his California friends were standing on the porch, not filming now, just watching, probably realizing that their glamping investment opportunity had just turned into a bankruptcy case study. You planned this, Ryan said. His voice was barely a whisper now. You knew this would happen. I knew that ranching is complicated, I said. I knew that Dad left you a business with operational debts. I knew that removing the collateral would trigger the loan repayment clause. But I did not plan anything, Ryan. You planned this. You inherited the company. You issued the eviction order. You made every single decision that led to this moment. I just followed your orders. I turned and walked away, left him standing there in the mud, in his silk bathrobe, with his $2 million problem. By noon, the ranch looked like a ghost town. Empty pastures, empty barns. The only things left were the buildings and the land, the pretty parts, the parts that look good in photos but do not make money. We were loading the last of the equipment now. Tractors, hay balers, the welding equipment from the shop, everything that actually made the ranch function. One of Ryan's friends approached me, carefully, like he was worried I might bite. He was wearing designer jeans and a jacket that had probably never seen actual work. "Excuse me," he said. "I am sorry to bother you, but is there any way to fix this? Like financially? What would it take to make this right?" $2 million, I said. Pay to First Agricultural Bank by end of business today. That is what the bank will accept to clear the debt. And if he does not have that, the friend asked, then the bank forecloses on Montana Sky Ranch LLC, I said. They take possession of the property, probably auction it off in a few months to recover their loan. That is how foreclosure works. The friend looked pale, but that means, we were going to invest. We had plans. This was going to be amazing. Yeah, I said, plans are great. But ranching is not about plans. It is about understanding what you actually own versus what you actually owe. Your friend owned land with a $2 million operational debt secured by collateral he did not understand. Now he owns land with a $2 million debt that is due immediately and no collateral to support it. That is called being underwater. The friend walked away, went back to the house, probably to pack, probably to call his own lawyers and make sure he was not liable for any of this. Smart move. By 1 p.m., we were done. 5,000 head of cattle relocated, every piece of equipment loaded and moved. The ranch was empty, just buildings and land and debt. I stood in the middle of the main yard and looked around. 40 years of work, and it all fit on 23 trucks. My crew was packing up. Tom Hendricks walked over. "That was something, Jack," he said. "I have been hauling cattle for 30 years. Never seen an operation move that fast. You okay?" "I am fine," I said. "Just following orders." Tom nodded. He understood. "Word is going to get around, what you did here. People are going to talk." "Let them talk," I said. "I did not do anything illegal. I removed my property from private land at the owner's request. Everything was documented. Everything was legal." "Still," Tom said. He grinned. "Hell of a way to comply with an eviction notice." I paid the crew. Cash. Handed out envelopes right there in the yard. Nobody asked questions. Everyone just thanked me, shook my hand, and left. Within 30 minutes, it was quiet. Just me and my old blue Ford. And Ryan standing on the porch of the main house, holding his phone, probably talking to lawyers who were telling him things he did not want to hear. I got in the truck, started it up, drove down the access road one last time as an employee. The road I had driven 10,000 times over 40 years. Every pothole was familiar, every curve, every gate. This place was in my blood, in my bones, and I had just killed it. Not killed it, corrected it. I made about 10 miles down the highway when my phone rang. Ryan. I pulled over to the shoulder, turned off the engine, answered. I did not even get to say hello. The screaming started immediately. "What did you do?" "The bank called again. They froze all the accounts. Everything. They want $2 million by 5 p.m. or they are filing foreclosure papers tomorrow morning. Jack, you have to fix this. You have to help me. This is insane. This is..." I let him scream. I sat there watching a hawk circle in the distance. Listened to Ryan's voice get higher and more desperate. Listened to him cycle through anger and panic and bargaining and back to anger. When he finally ran out of words, I spoke. "I did not do anything to you. Ryan, I did exactly what you told me to do. You inherited a working ranch. That word is important. Working. The ranch worked because of the cattle and the equipment and the daily management. You inherited the pretty parts and told me to take away the working parts. Now you've got land and buildings and a $2 million debt with no way to service it. That is not sabotage. That is just basic economics. But you knew this would happen, Ryan said. He was crying now. Actually crying. You knew the loan would be called. You did this on purpose. I knew that actions have consequences, I said. I knew that ranching is not an Instagram opportunity. I knew that Dad left you a business you did not understand. But you did not ask for help. You did not ask questions. You just assumed you knew better. You assumed ownership meant control. Now you are learning the difference. Jack, please. There has to be something. Some way to fix this. I will give you the ranch back. You can have it. Just make this stop. I cannot make it stop, I said. The bank has been notified. The collateral has been removed. The debt is due. Those are facts. They do not care what you want or what I want. You need $2 million by 5 p.m. today. Do you have $2 million? Silence. Long silence. Then a whisper. No. Then you should probably start calling bankruptcy lawyers. I said, look up Chapter 11. That is for businesses. You might be able to restructure. Might not. Depends on what the bank wants to do. But that is your problem now, Ryan. Not mine. Good luck. I hung up, sat there for a moment. The hawk was gone now. Just empty sky and empty road. I started the truck and kept driving. Had cattle to check on. Had to make sure they were settling in at their new locations. Had to make sure my crew had been paid. Had work to do. Always work to do. The next 6 months were strange. Quiet. I was living in a rented house near Sarah Chen's ranch. Running my cattle on borrowed land. Waiting. I knew how this would end. I had known from the moment I made that phone call to Mr. Henderson, but I had to wait for the system to grind through its process. Montana Sky Ranch LLC filed for bankruptcy 3 days after the loan was called. Ryan tried to restructure, tried to find investors, tried everything. But you cannot restructure a company that has no operational assets and no revenue stream. The bank was not interested in payment plans. They wanted their money. When they could not get their money, they foreclosed. The property went into receivership, sat empty all summer. I drove past it once. The grass in the pastures was getting long. Weeds were growing in the yard. The place looked dead, abandoned. It broke something in me to see it like that, but I did not stop, just kept driving. The auction was scheduled for October, 6 months and 2 weeks after Ryan had ordered me to remove my property. The notice was published in the county paper. Public auction. Montana Sky Ranch LLC and all associated assets. 10,000 acres. Buildings. Water rights. Brand. Everything. Minimum bid set at the outstanding debt amount. $2 million plus legal fees and costs. About $2.1 million total. The auction was held on the courthouse steps. Old-fashioned, the way they used to do it 100 years ago. I drove into town early that morning. Cold day, first frost of the season. The kind of morning that makes your breath fog and your fingers stiff. There was a small crowd, mostly lawyers and bank people. A few locals who wanted to watch. And Ryan, he was standing off to the side. Not in a suit this time. Just jeans and an old sweater. He looked smaller somehow. Deflated, like someone had let the air out of him. He saw me. Our eyes met. He did not look angry. Did not look sad. Just empty. Beaten. He knew why I was there. Everyone knew why I was there. The auctioneer was a bank lawyer. Young guy. Nervous. He read through the legal description. The property details. The terms. Cash or certified funds. Sold as is. No warranties. Standard foreclosure language. Do I hear an opening bid? He said. His voice cracked a little. Minimum bid is $2,100,000. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody bid. Foreclosure auctions are weird like that. Most people do not have $2 million in cash. Most people who do have that kind of money do not want to buy a dead ranch with no operational assets. I raised my hand. $2,100,001. The auctioneer looked relieved. Going once for $2,100,001. Do I hear any other bids? More silence. Ryan was staring at the ground. His California friends were long gone. Back to San Francisco. Back to their actual lives. He was alone. Going twice, the auctioneer said. He waited the required time. Looked around. Nobody moved. Sold, he said. He hit his gavel on a wooden block. Sold to bidder number 12 for $2,100,001. I had already arranged the financing. Had the certified check in my pocket. First Agricultural Bank was happy to loan me the money. They knew me, knew I could make the ranch work, knew the land was worth way more than $2 million. It was a safe bet for them. I signed the papers right there on the courthouse steps. The lawyer handed me a folder. Deed, title, keys, everything. Montana Sky Ranch was mine. I walked down the courthouse steps. Ryan was still standing there. I stopped next to him. Did not say anything at first. Just stood there. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. I am sorry, he said. His voice was barely audible. I did not understand. I thought I could. I know, I said, and that was all I said. Because what else was there? He had learned the lesson. Learned it the hard way. The only way some people can learn. I walked to my truck. The same old blue Ford. My severance package. It started on the third try. It always does. I drove out of town. Took the highway west. Took the access road north. And there it was. The gate. Montana Sky Ranch. The sign was rusty. Needed painting. I would get to that. There was a lot of work to do. I stopped the truck at the gate. Got out. Stood there looking at the land. My land. 10,000 acres of Montana rangeland. Empty now. Quiet. Waiting. The grass had grown long. The fences needed repair. The buildings needed maintenance. But the bones were good. The water was good. The land was good. Ryan and Dad had inherited ownership. I had inherited knowledge. They thought ownership was enough. They were wrong. In Montana, land is not an asset. Land is just a hungry mouth waiting to be fed. You need cattle to feed the land. You need equipment to work the land. You need knowledge to manage the land. You need all of it together, or you have nothing. They wanted to humiliate me by making me take the movable property, the expenses, the costs, the things they thought were beneath them. Turned out, those things were the only things that mattered. The cattle were the collateral. The equipment was the tools. The knowledge was the power. They gave me everything I needed to take everything they had. I got back in the truck, drove through the gate, up the access road, past the empty pastures, past the barns, up to the main house. I parked in the same spot I had parked 10,000 times before, walked up the porch steps, sat down in the old wooden chair, Dad's chair, his grandfather's chair. The sun was setting, orange and gold across the valley. I could see the mountains in the distance, could see the land rolling away in every direction. My land, earned, not inherited. Earned. There is a saying. I do not know who said it first. Maybe someone smart. Maybe just some rancher who learned the hard way. The land does not care who owns it. The land only cares who works it. Dad and Ryan owned the land, but they never worked it. They never understood it. They never respected it. I understood it. I worked it. I respected it. And now I owned it. Funny how things work out sometimes. They try to give me scraps. Try to take everything and leave me with nothing but expenses and problems. But expenses and problems are just another way of saying assets and opportunities, if you know what you're doing. I sat there until the sun went down, until the stars came out, until the temperature dropped and I could see my breath again. Then I went inside. There was coffee to make, plans to write, calls to schedule. Tomorrow I would start bringing the cattle back, would start rebuilding, would start making this place work again. But tonight, I just sat in the dark and drank my coffee and thought about the last 6 months. Thought about Dad and his bourbon and his stupid sayings about ownership versus labor. Thought about Ryan and his glamping dreams and his expensive education that taught him everything except what mattered. Thought about the fact that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people destroy themselves while you do exactly what they tell you to do. Sometimes the best revenge is being right when everyone else is wrong. Sometimes the best revenge is just outlasting everyone who underestimated you. They gave me the scraps. Turned out the scraps were the meal. They kept the plate. Turns out the plate was empty. That is ranching. That is Montana. That is life. I finished my coffee. Went to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. But then again, they all are. That is the job.